Welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast, where powerful women are interviewed every week to share real inspiring stories and incredible insight to help women or anyone break the barriers, be a part of innovation, shatter the glass ceiling, and dominate to the top of their sport, industry, or life's mission. Join us as we celebrate exceptional women and step into our power. And now, here's your host, Angela Gennari.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. My name is Angela Gennari, and today I'm here with Michelle Merritt. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, how are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me. So drawing on her 20-year corporate career as a Fortune 500 recruiter, corporate culture executive, and Chamber of Commerce leader, Michelle provides a wealth of experience for her clients. Today, she guides executive leaders through the end-to-end job search process, from resume writing to negotiating offers. So love this because we love some good career management expertise and we don't get that enough. So I am excited to talk to you.
I'm excited to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So what made you want to get into career management, especially on the executive side?
Right. So early in my career, I was a recruiter. I was an executive recruiter in national home building until 2008, when suddenly no one needed a home building recruiter anymore.
Correct. Right. Well, they all needed jobs, just not the recruiter.
Right. Exactly. Not the people paying the bills, sadly. So, So at that point, I made a shift, as we all did in the industry. But ultimately, a couple of years later, friends started calling saying, hey, while you're doing other things, will you help me with my resume? Will you help me through this interview? I'll pay you, right? Sort of thing. So I started using that expertise that I had built. I was always great on the candidate side of recruiting, right? I am not an exceptional business development person, but I am great at making sure we have the most prepared candidates, that everyone's ready for their interviews, things like that. I would have, division CEOs call me and say, hey, can you not prep this person because I can't out interview you?
Oh,
right. And so
that's amazing.
Which never happened. Of course I prepped my candidates.
Right.
But as a result, that just parlayed into a business. And 12 years ago, I opened my own consulting firm and doing resumes and career management. At the same time, Deborah Boggs, our DNS CEO, was opening DNS Executive Career Management. We've been friends for many years. We supported each other's businesses, traded work back and forth, all of those things. And in November of 22, sat down and decided it was time we did it all together. And so after about 13 months, the merger was complete. So the merger became complete January 1st of this year. And
congratulations.
Thank you. Business has skyrocketed. We can't keep up, which is a good problem to have.
Yeah. That's a very good problem to have. Good for you. I love to see that. So I have so many questions. I mean, just so many.
Let's talk.
So first of all, I need to dive into this college, no college question, because if anyone can answer that question, it's going to be you. So there's so much debate right now. Is college still worth the price?
That's a good question. And what I would say is it depends on the person.
Okay.
Right. So everyone's going to come to that decision from a different place. We are seeing more employers opt to take experience over degree. So oftentimes someone who is mid-career will come to me and say, I don't know if I can apply for that leadership position because I didn't finish college, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't apply.
Okay.
What it means is that we're going to use our network to really start to open doors for us, right? We're not necessarily going to rely on the piece of paper and checking the box in the database that says, yes, I have a bachelor's degree. And what we're seeing is far more young people today starting their own businesses when they're fresh out of even high school. We see young people starting their own businesses in high school.
My son has his own very successful business in high school. He is 17 years old and a junior, and he's good. He has a very successful business right now. So it's starting much younger.
It is. Now, that also means, continue to pursue education so you know how to manage your business correctly. Right? We don't want to just say, oh, I've got this and stop learning.
Right.
We never want to stop learning.
Right.
He may decide at some point that the degree is right for him, or he may not. And
Yeah.
it sounds like you may be in support of him finding his own path. And so I think it's great to recognize there are pros and cons to both.
Mm-hmm.
And we are seeing more and more employers open up opportunities to people who don't necessarily have 4-year degrees.
Yeah, well, I was curious about that because, with the expense of college now, when I went to college, it was expensive, and that was, 20-ish years ago. So,
Understand, me too.
but when I went, it was pretty expensive and it was challenging to pay back that debt. But now colleges cost exponentially more. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, even baseline, state universities, I mean, we're not even talking Ivy Leagues, can easily run you into several hundred million or several $100,000 by the time you finish your degree.
Feels like millions.
I know it does feel like millions, 11 billion million dollars.
Right. Well, and what I will also say is take advantage if you have a strong community college
Yeah.
in your community.
Mm.
Community college can be a great way to start
Mm-hmm.
that process to get some of the basics out of the way. For people who still have high school students at home,
Yeah.
things like that, a lot of school systems now offer a partnership with
Yeah.
your local state college or community college where your student can be pursuing credit so that
Mm-hmm.
we had one young woman a while back who I met. She was amazing, and she is graduating high school. She graduated last year, high school with her 2-year associate's degree
Oh, wow. That's
because she was
fantastic.
taking. I live in Indiana, and
Mm.
she was taking advantage of the Ivy Tech, which is the statewide community college here. She was taking advantage of the Ivy Tech program that allowed her to pursue dual credit, and
Oh,
so she
that's
graduated
fantastic.
high school with an associate's degree.
That is really, really good. That's awesome. Yeah, I know that's happening in Georgia a lot too, as people are
Mm-hmm.
doing a dual enrollment, and that has helped tremendously just in terms of how much time that you have to commit after high school into
Right.
college courses. So that's great.
Absolutely.
Now, next question is an MBA worth it?
Right. Again, I'm going to say it depends on the person,
Uh-huh.
right? There are organizations where if you want to move up, you have to have that master's degree.
Yeah.
You have to have the MBA. It might be an MSO. There can
Mm.
be a variety of things there, right? Depending on the type. So if you are looking at a finance role, if you're
Uh-huh.
looking at a business operations role, that MBA may be really beneficial for you. Look
Right.
at the organization that you want to be a part of and that you want to move up into and ask yourself, does everyone there check their bios, check their
Yeah.
LinkedIn profiles? Does everyone there have a master's degree?
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
so, that might be something to think about investing in.
Yeah.
And there are programs that aren't as expensive as others,
Yeah.
right? Unless we're talking about Ivy League education, we see a lot of organizations, a lot of companies who are less concerned about where the degree is from, assuming it's from an
Mm.
accredited university,
Mm-hmm.
and more concerned about the fact that you completed it.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and one of the things that I've often not complained about, but I just found surprising was, I had actually just spoke about this on my previous podcast, but my first 2 years of college, I did okay, average, not anything outstanding. And I was just determined. I'm like, okay, I need to turn this around. I need to ace college. I need to get I'm
I
graduating on the
love
dean's
that
list.
tenacity.
And so I lived off campus. I studied my butt off, and sure enough,
Mhm.
I graduated on the dean's list. And then a total of 0 people have asked for my transcript to see what my grade point average was. And I was
Right,
like, dang it. But
right,
I don't know
right.
if that's
And that's not to say that you shouldn't try, but
no,
it is
definitely
something.
try.
It is, and the further you get out of college,
Yeah,
the more distance between graduation and
correct.
where you are today, the
Yeah,
less people care about your
right.
GPA.
Well, and I will say that if you do plan to get an advanced degree, it does matter. But
It does.
when it comes to, going into the workforce, and I mean, one of the reasons I buckled down is because I did plan to get an advanced degree. And then I had planned to go back and get my MBA or my PhD. I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to go into, learning psychology or business. And so I was
Mhm.
kind of in between the two. And just expenses, I wanted to go to law
Sure.
school. It's like, yeah, I think I'll just take a few years off. And then, the same story, you just never go back. And then after I realized I was going to go into the business world, I had started my second company by this point. I thought, I should probably go back and get an MBA. But then as I talked to people, more and more people said, well, are you just going to be an entrepreneur? Because the only person who would care about an MBA at that point is you.
You.
You're not climbing a corporate ladder anywhere. So, I mean, there are definitely some benefits to the knowledge you get with an MBA.
You bet. You bet.
But also, did I want to sacrifice the life experience I was getting in business to get the MBA? And so it's a trade-off. You really got to think about, what are you learning on either side? And is that going to be required for taking the next step as an executive?
Right. I completely agree. I think that it is a question of, does it fit the individual and where you see your career going?
Very interesting. Okay, very cool. So as somebody who, really places executives and you work on a higher level, what do you feel like are those skill sets that are the most important to have?
So one of my favorite groups to really work with among our clients are those making their first leap to the C-suite,
Okay.
right? And part of the reason for that is because it's a real transition from being the tactical leader,
Yeah.
right? And I hear it especially from women. I would never ask my team to do anything I wouldn't do. I'm a roll up my sleeves sort of leader.
Yes.
That's great,
Mm-hmm.
but there's always a but. The problem is when we start to shift to the EVP role, the C-suite, that sort of thing, what we see is a need for visionary leadership.
Yeah.
For strategy, right? We shift from tactical to strategy. And so one of the most important things is being able to demonstrate, yes, you've been a tactical leader, but how have you led the organizational vision and mission and put your team in place to do that?
That's great. And it's hard to do that. And, I find, and I hire a lot of people with my business just because we staff variety of positions, but we're not on the, anyway, so we'll take, for example, a security guard or somebody who's been a great employee, and we'll try to put them into a supervisor position. And sometimes it's a real crash and burn. Not everybody is fit for leadership or management the same way they're fit to do their job exceptionally well. So for those people who are like, well, I'm the best at this particular thing, leadership may or may not be in their cards, for something like that. Would you agree?
Right. I think so, but I think leadership can be taught. Right. I am someone who really does believe that if we equip our people, we can teach those valuable leadership skills, but we have to be mentors to our people. We have to train up our team and give them not only the opportunity to learn, but the opportunity to fail safely.
Yes, agreed. Yeah. Well, and it has to be a space where they also understand the importance of certain nuances when it comes to leadership. And that is, handling things with grace and with professionalism. And there's just certain ways to address employees, and there's certain ways to, speak with a client that's going to, you're just going to have to kind of groom those parts. But you can do that in education.
Absolutely. And many times that doesn't come naturally.
Right.
And so until we have someone point out that something we say or the joking around that we do with our coworkers is not necessarily going to be okay when you're in that leadership role, things like that. With those shifts and those transitions need to be communicated clearly to our team as we're mentoring them.
Okay. I love that. So you were talking about your network and reaching out to your network. So how does one do that? So, and I'm not looking for a job. I'm perfectly happy running my company. But if I were to, go say, okay, I need to find something else. Something has happened and, a new CEO has taken over. What do I do? And how do you activate your network when you're searching for a job?
So it's the number one question people ask me. Number two is salary negotiation. So, when we talk about networks, we talk about a couple of things. Number one, we recognize that we all have them.
Yes.
Right? Because people will say to me, Michelle, I don't have a network. I only know the people I work with. That is not true.
Right.
The other thing I will say is people will tell me, oh, I'm an introvert and I don't want to network. Right.
Yeah.
Introverts make the best networkers often because spoken as a true introvert, I am someone who values the one-on-one relationship, right? And so networking comes from good one-on-one connection.
Yeah.
So those of you saying that I'm an introvert, I can't network, it's not true.
Okay.
So what I always do is tell people, think of your network in terms of every single person you know.
Mm,
So that is your neighbor's brother's cousin sister's friend, because they may be the key that opens the door to your next opportunity.
absolutely.
And then I break my network up into categories. This always sounds a little corny, but it's true. I break my network up into what I call the 2 a.m. group,
Hmm.
meaning the people you can contact in the middle of the night in a crisis who will willingly get out of bed and help you.
Yes.
My network is also my 6 a.m. group, people who outside of the normal course of the day will happily help, but probably not the people you're calling it to in the morning. And then lastly, what I call the 8 a.m. group. And those are those people who throughout the normal course of the day will be happy to help, but probably not going to, extremes outside of the normal course of the day to help.
Okay.
And so we start identifying those lists, actually making lists of who we know, all of those things, and then start identifying, what do we know about the people? Where do they work? Where do they worship? Where do their kids go to school? What's their alma mater? Who do they drink with on Friday and brunch with on Sunday? Sort of
Okay.
thing, so that we can
Yeah.
start to identify who we need to reach out to start activating that search.
Love that. I love that because you're right. I mean, when you look at, oh, well, who's my professional network? That's not your only network. Your professional
Correct.
network is not it. You actually have a huge network of people. So I
Mm-hmm.
love that. Okay, very cool. And so as people are networking, what is the ask? What are you asking of people?
Well, number one, the first thing you're asking is, how can I help you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Networking is never about you. It's always about the other person.
Yes.
Right? So the first thing we always want to say is, how can I help?
Yeah.
Right? And coming at this with a desire to help the other person. And you may say, listen, I'm early in my career and there is nothing I can bring to this person. You don't know that.
Yeah.
And sometimes just being polite enough to ask is enough to open that door and make someone want to help you as well. So it's always, how do I help you? But then it's also know what you want from the conversation, right? And
Yeah.
if you're trusting someone, especially in that 2 a.m. group or the 6 a.m. group, if you are
Mm-hmm.
trusting someone like that, it may simply be, I am excited about the opportunity ahead. Maybe I'm a little nervous about the opportunity to make a change, but I trust your judgment and I would love your input.
Oh, that's
And can we
great.
talk? Right?
Yeah.
I never call someone up and say, "Hey, can we grab coffee and talk?" Because that doesn't deliver the sense of urgency that I
Right.
need. And I always want
Mm-hmm.
to know what the topic is. The other thing I never say to people, and it's just a personal pet peeve, is, can I pick your brain?
I hate that phrase.
You pick through trash.
Yeah.
You cannot pick through my knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I always find that phrase insulting. And what we
Hmm.
want to be careful of is to really demonstrate that we respect the person's opinion. And there's a reason that we're reaching out to them. The
Hmm.
last thing we always ask is, who else do I need to know? In every networking conversation, doesn't matter the topic, I'm always asking, who else do I need to know? Who else do I
That's
need to
great.
talk to?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm following up. Unless I am morally opposed to the person for some reason,
Right.
I am always following up with whoever that person recommended, because they know something I don't.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such great advice. I like that a lot because you're right. I mean, there's so many instances where, if you go in with a helping agenda, how can I
Mhm.
help you? I trust your advice, I trust your opinion, I value you as a friend and a confidant. And I think that just opens it up. When somebody calls me, they're like, "Hey, let's go get coffee. I want to pick your brain." I'm immediate like, "Oh God, it's gonna be a 20 questions thing." Like like I have to be mentally prepared for something like that. Whereas a conversation is just a conversation. If
Right.
somebody says, "Hey, I
Right.
trust your judgment, let's talk," fine, but
Mhm.
the other way sounds like you're going to interview me and I've got to have all the answers. And,
Right.
you're going to be, you're going to be deep diving into the knowledge that I've got. And that to me is a stressful situation. Like I
Agreed.
don't, I'm not ready for that.
Agreed.
So,
And it also sometimes tells people that your knowledge isn't valuable enough for them to pay you,
correct. Yep.
right?
Yep.
Because you've earned this
Mm,
knowledge, right? That
that's
has
right.
come with lots of experience that you have built
Yeah.
over the years. And so we want to be mindful of respecting people's knowledge and
Hmm.
how they're compensated for that.
Absolutely. I agree. So So, okay, one of the things that I think is a big discussion right now is how people get out of college and they immediately think they need to make X amount of money and be in this role and that role, and they haven't
Mhm.
earned their place into it. So, when is the right time? So somebody getting out of college and they say, okay, I want to make six figures and I want to have this executive title, and they kind of have that mentality of like, from zero to 60, right? And they've skipped
Mhm.
one to 59. And so when is that right time? And how do you start building that up? And what is the proper approach to getting
So
that
I'll say
leadership?
first and foremost, I admire their courage and their chutzpah.
Yeah.
I really do. I do. Hey, you do not get what you don't ask for in
That's
this life,
right.
right?
That's
And
right.
so I love that approach,
Right.
right?
There's no short of audacity in the world, that's for sure.
Correct, correct. So, and what we will often see is, men will apply for a role that they are 40% qualified for
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
say, yep, I'm ready. I got it. Give me the title. Let's go.
Let's do
Right.
it. Yeah.
Women will call me and say, I'm only 85% qualified. And so I shouldn't apply, should I?
Right.
Right. Totally different approach. It's not a critique of our male colleagues. If anything, it is a reminder that we need to be following that example.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there's anything wrong with shooting high, aiming high. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I think what we have to be able to prove is what we've accomplished to this point that makes us worthy of the title and the opportunity.
Right. Right. Agreed. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. I like that answer because, a lot of people will say, well, I just got this degree and I did really well in school and I've got, 100,000 social media followers. So clearly I know what I'm talking about and
Right.
therefore I need this role. And it's really just about what have you actually accomplished that's relevant.
What have you accomplished, but also what do you bring? Right.
Yeah,
Maybe you bring an innovative idea.
sure.
Maybe you bring the opportunity to demonstrate a new skill or a new path forward for an organization. So perhaps if it is a branding position, maybe you are bringing those
Hmm.
followers in a new group that someone hasn't thought of. That's great. Be willing to demonstrate that. In the same breath, also remember that you do have to prove yourself along the
Hmm.
way.
Yeah,
There
there's
has to be some meat
expectations.
there,
Yeah.
and take ownership of your accomplishments. When you're early in your career, it can be
Hmm.
hard to take ownership of all that you've done. What I always caution people who are a little further in their career, especially women will tend to use we instead of I when
Yes.
talking in an interview. Be
Yes.
mindful to make sure that you're talking about your accomplishments leading the team, that you take personal ownership of that.
That's a great point because one of the questions that I ask on my podcast all the time is when have you given away your power and when did you
Mhm.
step into your power? And most of the time it has to deal with somebody else taking credit. And many times as women, we don't stand up for that and say, actually, no, that was me that did that, or that was,
Right.
my achievement, my accomplishment, my discovery, my invention. And I
Mhm.
was actually just reading something this morning about, have you heard of the Matilda effect?
I've not.
It is a paper that was written about how many things that were invented, and the credit was given to their male colleague,
Uh,
counterpart, supervisor,
mhm.
whatever it is, to the point, to the extent that the men have accepted the Nobel Prize for the female's invention, and her name was never even noted.
Mm.
So yeah, so things like that. But you're
What a
right.
great question.
Yeah, so I feel like that is something that, as women, we're very community minded. We're very,
Mhm.
we think outside of just ourselves. And so because of that, I used to constantly say the word we, like when I'm
Mhm.
talking about, things that my team has done, I'm always, even when the company was literally just me, I would say, so we have implemented a training program.
Right, right, right.
And so, yeah, I think that that's just a
Yeah,
natural thing that we do. And we're very quick to
sure.
not stand up and take credit for something. So I think it's very
Right.
interesting.
Yeah.
So how do you get to your first C-suite role? What would you say would be, how would you take that first step?
Right. How would I take that first step? I would identify what I bring to the table, what I've
Uh-huh.
accomplished, what I've achieved to this point. I would also have an honest conversation with my mentors about where the gaps are, where the
Ah,
blind spots are.
that's
Right.
great.
So I'm a big proponent of knowing both, right?
Yeah.
No, owning what you bring, right? And being willing to broadcast that, again, saying I instead of we, etc. Having that conversation around the visionary leadership and the strategy as opposed to just tactics. But then I also am seeking out sponsors. I'm seeking out advocates, right? And I'm talking with my internal and external champions about what I need to do better. Where are the gaps? And it's interesting. The higher up you go, the less willing people are to identify the gaps.
Oh, interesting.
And so find those people in your life who will pull you aside and go, there's this over here. I'm being hypercritical right now, but there's this over here, right? I gave a talk recently on a panel, and a coach that I've worked with in the past was in the audience. And so immediately after the panel discussion, I said, give it to me. I do this for a living. So tell me what I need to fix.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. And it was very much a supportive conversation, but also a very critical one. And she even said, Michelle, I'm digging, right? I'm having to really dig to give you something to improve upon. That's very flattering. But I never want to leave a conversation not knowing where I can improve or what the gap is that I need to be mindful of.
Well, and that to me, that's a great, it's something unique. Not everybody has that quality. Some people, when you start to say, hey, what can I be doing better? And you actually start to give the feedback, they become very defensive, or they give you all the reasons why they did it the way they did it. And really, it's just about being careful because, when you have the opportunity to learn and when you have the opportunity to get feedback, take it really to heart and, understand that you may have your reasons for why you did one thing or another, but take it all in and absorb it and see where that might be coming from. Again, everybody has a different perspective. So for them, something may not have worked for them, and that's okay. But I love that you're able to really absorb that information and you ask for it.
You bet. And it's a matter of active listening, right?
Yeah.
Because instead of listening to defend your position.
Yes.
And so I find myself having to say, okay, stop and listen to what she's saying.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, okay, how could I have been better?
Yeah.
Now I may choose not to agree with her feedback, and that's perfectly okay.
Sure.
I'm the adult in the room. I can choose to agree or disagree. I can choose not to do anything with it. But having that person who is willing to provide that makes a huge difference in our professional development.
It really does. And it's the emotional intelligence to be able to take it, as it is, and as intended and do something productive with it. So that's wonderful. All right. So I want to pivot a little bit because we talk a little bit about, we talked about getting into the job search, getting into that corporate role, how to kind of bring your best self to the table. So how do you negotiate a salary then? Because you talked about a salary negotiation being your second most frequently asked question. So how do you start a salary negotiation, and what do you think are the challenges for women in particular in salary negotiations?
So a couple of things is, number one, we want to know our numbers going in, right? We want the salary negotiation starts long before someone puts an offer together.
Yes.
Right. So even before you start interviewing, or even before you submit a resume to a particular company, know your automatic yes, your automatic no numbers, right? So what does that look like? Your automatic yes is, if it is this package over here, because compensation is made up of a variety of things. If it is this package, I could say yes without having to negotiate. Wouldn't advise that, but you could say yes. We have that bubble over here. Then we have our automatic no. What is that? It doesn't matter how much I like you, how much I like the team, how excited I am about the work. If that package isn't comprised of this over here, I have to say no.
Right.
Right. So know your numbers, know what makes up compensation for you, right? That's base salary, that's bonus potential, that's stock options, that's retirement funds, health insurance, all the things, right? PTO, all the things that come with that. And so how do those things fit your need, right? And everyone's going to be different. So we start with knowing all of that, understanding what the market's going to bear based upon your unique location, your unique industry, your title, all of those things as well. So you know that going into it. I think women tend to fear looking bossy and another word that I don't say, and if they're asking for what they want.
Right.
My question back to a woman every time she says that is, do you really want to work for someone that would call you that word?
Right. Yeah.
Right? No, instead, we want to own where we need to be. Again, be able to demonstrate what we've accomplished and what we've achieved and why we've earned the right to be there at that level.
I like that. So, because what I see a lot as an employer is people will come to me and say, well, this is where my household expenses are, and this is where I need to be. Is that a fair way to negotiate or no?
I would not. So how you spend your money is not your employer's business.
Correct.
And nor is it their issue to compensate you for that.
Right.
Right? What is important is what you bring to the table and how you're going to impact the employer moving forward to make their investment in you a wise one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, because I think that's one of the things that people get this idea of like, well, this is where I need to be financially, but that is a sliding scale because if you make more money, you tend to spend more money. And so
Right.
when does that stop? And so like I know people who are making $50,000 who are living comfortably. I know people who are making $250,000 who are strapped. And so
Right.
it has to do with your spending, and that should not play into, how
Correct.
the employer determines your salary. So I
Correct.
can agree with you.
But I do think that knowing your numbers, knowing what you
Mm-hmm.
need to
Right.
be able to afford the lifestyle that you want
Mm-hmm.
means understanding that number. You don't need to share that with the employer. And the
Right.
other thing I'll point out too is when an employer asks, where do you need to be? I never give a range,
Okay.
right? Because if I give a range, what I'm telling the employer is if my range is in your 250 example, if my range is between 250 and 300, I'm telling you as the employer that I'll take the 250.
Yeah. Okay.
So instead, I'm responding the one time it's okay to answer a question with a question, right? I'm responding by saying, share if you will give me the range of the position, I'll be transparent with you as to whether or not I can make that work. And if in our example here, you say to me, well, Michelle, my range is 250 to 275, I, as the candidate, may say to you, okay, you know what? So you're aware I'm in the top end of your range, but I'm excited about the opportunity and love to continue the conversation. Or if you said to me, our range is 2 to 210, and I know I can't accept under 250, I may just be clear with you and say, unfortunately, I am substantially above that, and I don't know that we can fill that gap.
Mm-hmm.
But if another opportunity were to come open that is a higher paid position, I'd love to talk about that.
Okay.
Because there's no point in I'm all for interviewing and that kind of thing. But if you know ahead of time that you're a $50,000 or $100,000 gap on a $200,000 role, that's a 30% gap.
Sure.
If you're really that far, it may be time to say, okay, this isn't the right fit, and look at the next one.
Right. Right. That makes sense. Okay. Do you think women ask for lower than men?
Yes,
Salaries?
I do.
Hmm.
I do.
Why
Know
do you
your
think?
numbers.
Yeah. Why do you
I
think
think they're
that
afraid.
is? Mm-hmm.
I think they're afraid. They're afraid to look greedy. They're willing to prove themselves, that kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
instead, let's say here is what I bring
Right.
to your organization. Here is how I will help your organization grow and make this a worthy investment.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. This is what I bring to the table, and this is where I feel I add value. So I like that. All right, very cool. So what tips would you give to somebody in an executive interview?
Good question. So couple things I always do. Number one, treat it like a conversation. Right? I'm always concerned when an executive interview is comprised of 6 questions that the interviewer gets to ask you and 3 questions that you're allowed to ask the interviewer. That's a red flag for me.
Yeah.
If it's an executive level interview, you need this to be a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I will say is understand your numbers. We've talked about that already.
Yep.
And be able to articulate your accomplishments and your achievements. Have your resume ready, have your bios ready, all of those things. Have your LinkedIn profile up to date.
Yeah, that's so
You
important.
know,
I realize
it
when I'm
is.
interviewing
Mhm.
how many people do not have an updated LinkedIn, and it's really it's something that I give them kind of a mark against them.
Right? Absolutely. You know, your LinkedIn profile really is your online resume in
Hmm.
many ways. It helps you become searchable to
Yeah.
people who might be out there looking for something. You know, we call those hidden jobs. You, I know, are familiar with that term, but you know, these are the hidden jobs. These are the things that you don't know. They're not posted. And
Hmm.
yet somehow your best friend got a job that you would have loved to have had, but you never even heard about it. And it's because not all jobs are posted.
Right.
People are out looking for candidates to fill the positions that they're not even advertising. And LinkedIn can
Hmm.
be a great way to be seen by people
Hmm.
that you don't even know are looking.
That's very true. Absolutely very true. So I want to pivot really quickly
Mm-hmm.
to a whole different agenda, which is getting a seat on a corporate board. So
Oh,
that's
yeah.
something that a lot of people aspire to do,
Mm-hmm.
especially once you've been in the C-suite level, you're at the executive level, and now you want to take your career up another notch. And so you want to
Mm-hmm.
go onto a corporate board. How does one do that? And then what are the expectations of that person?
So, a couple of things to think about here. Number one is that 85% of corporate boards are found through people we know and through our network,
Oh, interesting.
right?
Okay.
So, only about 15% of corporate boards place candidates through recruiters or
Okay.
accept candidates through recruiters. So, you know, be mindful of that. Start thinking about, especially as your career advances, you know,
Mm-hmm.
what are the types of roles, types of boards, types of companies that you could benefit from, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, or bring benefit to, I should say. So, you know, let's say, for example, you're a COO
Mm-hmm.
in an organization. You know, you're going to have those operational, that area of operational expertise that you can bring to a board.
Right.
So your network, as you get to know people, and again, continue networking, even if you're not looking for a job, keep your network active so
Yeah.
that you're aware. Start letting people know, you know, I would really like to have my first board seat. I would really like to engage with, and it might be in the beginning in an advisory role or in a board
Mm-hmm.
observer role. It might not be as a board director just yet. You know, where this, maybe there are startups or smaller organizations looking for an advisor with your expertise. Maybe you come out of
Hmm.
pharma, maybe you come out of technology, something like that. Couple things to remember as a board member, right? They say nose in, hands out.
Oh,
So what,
interesting.
so that means we're nosing around, we're asking questions, right? The big picture questions, but the board isn't there to do things. The board is there to advise.
Right.
So remember, and that can be the hardest thing for people to remember, that in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, is
Mm-hmm.
what their role really is. Do you want to be involved with a startup organization? Are you passionate about helping a startup? Maybe it's a
Yeah.
tech startup that is, you know, has a background in the same industry that you have expertise in, something like that. Do you want to do that? Or are you looking for bigger roles? And as you advance in your career, there are more and more opportunities for that.
That's great. Yeah, because I think not every corporate board has to be IBM, Google, Apple. You can do corporate boards in many, many different ways. And I love the startup, tech
Mm-hmm.
idea because like I'm an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur. So there's some things that, things that I've definitely done in my, building my businesses that would help a
Mm-hmm.
startup community. So I think that that's very
You bet.
valuable.
You bet. And it might not be a startup. It might be something that someone's established,
Yeah.
right? But they're looking for a certain expertise, and your
Yeah.
network can help you uncover a lot of that.
Do you feel like there's more diversity on corporate boards now, or are we still struggling with getting that diversity?
Both.
Okay.
We are seeing an improvement.
Okay, good.
We are seeing things like the New York Stock Exchange have a program that will, you know, encourage their companies to diversify their boards, that sort of thing.
Mm,
Goldman Sachs, I believe has an initiative out there in the next few years. They expect 40% of
wow.
their company boards will be diverse.
Wow, that's
So
pretty that's
we're
pretty
seeing
ambitious.
we're seeing large companies push for it, but a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it is self-reported by the employer and a lot of or by the company, and a lot of companies choose not to report. So we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting.
And the other thing I'll point out about board seats is having a strong board resume, right? So a board
Mhm.
resume is different than an executive resume.
Okay.
A board resume is oftentimes a single page, sometimes two-page document, but it's really highlighting those governance skills,
Oh,
right?
interesting.
And any board work you've had up to that point, community engagement, thought leadership, all of those things. So making sure you have the right documents in place will make a difference too.
Oh, that's good advice because I didn't know that there was a difference between a board
Mm-hmm.
resume and a regular resume.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, very interesting. So, does volunteer work help out with a board resume if you're on a like if you're working with a nonprofit, like would that help?
I think having that experience can always be helpful. And I think it's great
Sure.
to show that you care about your community.
Mm-hmm.
We rarely see for profit boards choose someone just because of a nonprofit experience,
Okay.
right? Now, if we're talking about global nonprofits, that might be a little bit of a different story, right?
Sure.
But for your local small volunteer organization, it's probably not going to be enough.
Okay.
So we really want to demonstrate your corporate expertise as well. And that
Mm-hmm.
again is where starting in a board advisor capacity or a board observer capacity can make a big difference too.
Yeah. So how do you even know about a board advisor position?
It's a matter of networking. It's a matter
Uh-huh.
of targeting companies,
Mm-hmm.
getting to know companies that you're passionate about,
Hmm.
right? Leveraging your network to let people know, hey, I would be interested in that in a next step in my career, right? I would love that opportunity. Do you know of anyone? Do you know of organizations looking for an advisor in this capacity? Things like that. Treat it like you would a job search in many
Yeah.
ways.
Very cool. So I'm going to pivot right now and ask a few questions. So who inspires you?
So, who inspires me? My husband, every day,
Oh,
day in and day out.
that's awesome.
So, my husband is one of the smartest people you'll ever meet, but he's
Yeah.
also one of the most kind and generous people that you'll ever meet, and that's a rare finding. So,
Really
Jason's
is.
he's an amazing human, and I'm just really fortunate um, that he chooses our family every day, day in and day out.
That's wonderful. I love that. So, so as I was saying earlier, I always ask, as women, we give our power away all the time. Can you tell
Mhm.
me about a time that you gave your power away?
I can. So the first time I got what my parents probably would have called a real job out of school, right?
Yeah.
Um, my I did not know you could negotiate,
Oh,
and I left about $10,000 on the table, which at that time in 1990 something
yeah,
was a lot of money. And
sure.
if you do the math, it's $1.4 million over the lifetime of my career.
Oh,
Is what
wow.
that is what that comes out to be. If I had just taken that extra 10,000 and added that 10,000 alone every year to my 401k, it would have been about $1.4 million.
Wow. When you
So
put it in numbers like that, it really
yeah, it's
it's
painful, isn't
shocking.
it?
Yeah.
Mhm. And that's for some of us, that's the number we're looking for to give
Right.
ourselves permission to
Of
retire, right?
course.
So, yeah, that one was that I learned early on. I didn't know that you could negotiate. I was so eager for that job that I just didn't know that I could ask for more.
Yeah, well, and mine was when I so to that
Hmm.
comment, I didn't know when I was younger that you could sell a company. I had started my first company, but it was just kind of an accidental like, oh yeah, sure,
Hmm.
this is what I do. And I had a whole business, and when I was moving, people were offering money for like my contact list. And I was like, oh no, 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 it's fine. And I didn't know I could
Oh,
sell it. I did
yes, you
not know
can.
this. So anyway,
That has a value.
it sure does. So yeah, I learned that the hard way.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
second, third company later. So
Hmm.
anyway, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
My 18-year-old self would be just to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's probably something women say a lot, but, um, you know, I think that I was more consumed with what other people thought than what I thought.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be liked. And
Yep.
I think we do tend to give away power
Yep.
when we are taught to be liked.
Yeah. I think that's just something we fall into that trap a lot as women. So
Hmm.
definitely.
It's true.
So when building your business, you created a successful business, and then
I
you just
did.
recently went through an acquisition. What were the obstacles and challenges that you had in doing that?
So I said I would never own a business. So having the business itself was an obstacle and a challenge.
Uh-huh.
My parents are both business owners. My
Okay.
dad has owned an auto mechanics garage my entire life. He's been in
Uh-huh.
the same building for the last 50 years. My mom owns a residential cleaning company,
Wow.
and has had a monstrous list of clients for years and years and years since I was 16. And I watched my parents go through the blood, the sweat, and the tears,
Yeah.
sometimes literally,
Yep.
of owning a business,
Yep.
and just all that it took to start up two businesses and all of those things. I swore I would never do it, and yet, you know someone offered to pay me, and here we are. And all these years later it's worked out, but I swore I would never do it. So
Yeah.
for me, accepting the fact that this was the right thing for my life, and it really
Mm.
was the right thing for my life, and has clearly brought me to a very good place. um,
Hmm.
just accepting that I was a business owner was a hurdle.
Was it really? That's so interesting. I
Mhm.
love that because I guess as a child of entrepreneurs, that makes a lot of sense. My son is he's only ever known entrepreneurialism, and so
Mhm.
I wasn't shocked when he said he wanted to go into the military. I'm like, yep, that makes sense.
Nice and structured.
That's right.
Right.
So, well, Michelle, this has been really, really informative. Just such great information. You are such a wealth of knowledge, and I really appreciate everything.
Well,
Um,
thank you. It's been great fun.
yes, and I just have one more question for you. What
Sure.
do you wish more people knew?
About,
Anything you want?
oh boy. Okay, what do I wish people knew? I wish people knew how to demonstrate confidence
Oh, that's
without
so good.
arrogance,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So I think that we can overdo it,
Yeah, for sure.
right? And then be arrogant jerks. But then I also think that we need to demonstrate confidence, right? Some people call it executive presence, but really understanding how we present ourselves. And I always tell people, in that moment
Hmm.
when you're leaning in, you may or may not like that term, but when you're leaning forward and you're starting to talk about yourself and your accomplishments and your achievements,
Yeah.
you're going to get that feeling in the pit of your stomach that,
Yeah.
oh boy, I'm going too far. This is uncomfortable. All of that. I
Hmm.
need you to stay there
Yeah.
and stay put. Don't pull back. Our natural instinct is to pull back. I'm a Midwesterner, and I think as a Midwesterner, we're often taught to put our head down, do the work, and someone will
Yeah.
notice, right? Don't brag about yourself, right? No, I want you to stay there and be willing to state clearly what you've accomplished and what it's worth.
Hmm. Very good advice. Well, thank you. Again, Michelle, you've just been so wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So how can people find you?
So you connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the
Okay.
most easy place to do that. So you can find me at Michelle Merritt on LinkedIn. So that's the easiest way. But DNS Executive Career Management will take you there too.
Awesome. And then everyone, you can find Michelle on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. We will make sure all of her links and bio are up there as well. So thank you again, Michelle. And thank you
Thank
everyone
you.
for joining us for another episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. And we'll see you next time. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining our guests on the Pretty Powerful Podcast. And we hope you've gained new insight and learned from exceptional women. Remember to subscribe or check out this and all episodes on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. Visit us next time, and until then, step into your own power.